Welcome to Realms of the Other World, Episode 18, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Gettysburg is a very small town in southern Pennsylvania, best known for the Battle of Gettysburg. Gettysburg's early beginnings were in the mid-1700s when a tavern was built by Samuel Gettys, where soldiers and hunters would rest. Then a borough boundary was established and later a township developed between Hunters and Gettys towns, named after James Gettys' son, Samuel. This created Adams County. Soon buildings were built in Gettysburg. By 1860 there were 450 buildings. The town borough, a cute Victorian-style town, is surrounded by small rolling hills, beautiful deciduous forests, fields, streams, lakes, and rocky outcroppings. The area is basically a museum that focuses on the Gettysburg National Military Park, which is 9 square miles of battlegrounds where the Gettysburg Battle took place. There is also the Soldiers' National Monument where Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address. There are greater than 1,600 Civil War monuments, markers, and tablets in the area. Currently, about 8,000 residents live here today. The town of Gettysburg and the battlefields are known as one of the most haunted places in the United States. The Battle of Gettysburg took place from July 1st through the 3rd in 1863. It was part of the American Civil War that was fought between the United States of America, the Union side, and the 11 southern states that left the Union, the Confederate side. The war began primarily as a long-standing conflict over slavery. At the time of the Gettysburg Battle, there were 82,289 Union soldiers led by General George G. Meade, and 75,000 Confederate soldiers led by General Robert E. Lee. There were several battle events that happened in this location. It was the largest battle of the American Civil War, and the largest in the United States. After a victory at Chancellorsville, Virginia, Lee wanted to try a second invasion of the North. There were several bands of soldiers from areas of the country fighting for each side. Too many to name and too confusing. But in short, there were hills and ridges and rocky areas and the town of Gettysburg itself that were fought for to gain advantage. Several separate battles ensued as part of the larger one. At times the Confederates came out ahead and at times the Union. The first day the Union lost 4,000 men in the town of Gettysburg. The second day was the bloodiest day with the fighting at the Rocky Devil's Den, the wheat field, and the peach orchard. Another battle was happening at Little Round Top. By the end of the second day, the Union still held, but so many lives were lost on both sides. Day 3 was a disaster for the Confederates. An attack on the Union went all wrong, and Robert E. Lee knew it was his fault. After Day 3, it was over, and Lee had a 27-mile-long train of hospital wagons going down the road to Virginia. At the Potomac, there was a potential for another battle with Meade's army, but both sides were exhausted and had very little ammunition left, so a battle never took place there. In the end, the Union won the Battle of Gettysburg. An overwhelming number of casualties occurred. About 8,000 deaths, 10,000 were missing, and the others were wounded. An estimate of 569 tons of ammunition was used during those 3 days of battle. On November 19, 1863, President Lincoln made the Gettysburg Address, honoring those who died in Gettysburg as a reminder that they shall not have died in vain, and that a government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The Civil War lasted a total of 4 years. It was the bloodiest war of American history. 620,000 Americans died in total, approximately equal to those lost in the American Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, the Spanish War, World War I, World War II, and the Korean War combined. Many civilians were also lost from battles occurring on their land. The troops also spread epidemic disease. Women and children were ensnared. Rioters targeted innocent citizens. Plus food shortages were occurring. What was particularly difficult was that so many lost loved ones while they were not at home. Usually family died at home with death rituals taking place, bathing, grooming, posing, and corpse photography, all ways to deal with the death. So many were lost without being able to provide their families with this process. Although death occurred often without family, many soldiers bravely faced the ends of their lives, with nurses and volunteers by their sides. In the end, the United States, the Union side, defeated the Confederate States, and eventually the Southern states that had rebelled were allowed back into the United States. Slavery was abolished on December 6, 1865, when the 13th Amendment was passed. After the Battle of Gettysburg had finished, there was a mass aftermath of thousands of dead bodies, injured and dying. Many died from infections, typhoid, typhus, and dysentery. Most of those that died on the battlefield were buried in the evening in shallow graves on the land they died. The Union were buried with uniforms under cloths or in boxes. The enemy was typically buried in mass graves. In the beginning of the Civil War, there were no ambulance, no grave registration units, no official policy of notification for the families of the lost ones. It was said that the odor in the air was horrendous. Rain would wash away the soil and reveal remains of the dead. Some from both sides were lucky and were buried with a marker in deeper graves. Some families were able to request their loved one be embalmed and transported home, but that was rare. Those that died in hospitals or facilities generally were buried with more respect. Many of the corpses were later exhumed and buried properly in the National Military Park Cemetery, which was dedicated on November 19, 1863, by President Lincoln. It was a grueling task taken on by the brave. However, new remains were still being found up until 1996. In 1997, the town performed an official military burial for those remains and others that had been found over the years. This battle left a mark on Gettysburg. War, devastation, suffering, and thousands of sudden deaths left many spirits of the dead unsettled and confused. Much of the battlefield area is said to be haunted, as well as homes and businesses that were used to house and help the injured, sick, and dying. The Hoffman Mansion was a makeshift hospital. They say spirits of Union soldiers are still there. People see apparitions and hear voices. Also rumored is that the original owner's daughter hung herself in the attic and is seen in photos as lights and orbs. This house is available for private ghost hunting. The Gettysburg Hotel is a very active inn. The spirit of Rachel, a Civil War nurse, is supposedly here. She is seen running down the stairs as if going to someone in need. Drawers open on their own, and belongings have been gone through. Also, a woman is seen dancing in the ballroom, and a Union soldier, James Culbertson, is said to wander the hotel. Sach's Covered Bridge is another haunted location. It is rumored 3 Confederate soldiers were hung here for trying to desert the battle. The bridge is said to be guarded by the spirits of the soldiers who were hung. People feel uneasy here. A full apparition has been seen of a soldier walking on the bridge. The Daniel Lady Farm was used as a Confederate hospital. Bloodstains from amputated limbs, bloody fingerprints are still seen on the woodwork, as are initials and graffiti carved into the barn beams by soldiers. Forensic testing has proven the stains are blood, and cadaver dogs have found several graves around the farm. There is visual structural damage from the war on the house. It is very active, particularly the upstairs area. This is where they found a dead Confederate soldier in one of the bedrooms. The Jenny Wade house is another place that has spirits. Jenny was a seamstress during the battle time. Her sister had just had a baby, and Jenny was going to her house to help out and to also get a safe distance from the battle. She was making bread on July 2, 1863, when a stray Confederate bullet came through the window, hit her back, and pierced her heart. She died instantly. Her family wrapped her in a quilt and placed her in the basement until it was safe. It is said that she was the only civilian to die in the Battle of Gettysburg. She was temporarily buried in the front yard, then moved to a cemetery 6 months later, and then yet to another graveyard after that. The sudden death plus all the disturbances to her body are what is thought to have led to her unsettled spirit. People report being pushed, scratched, and pinched at the home. Gettysburg College was used as an emergency hospital for Confederates, and they were cared for in the Pennsylvania Hall. Many died from infections, wounds, and illness. Objects go missing or moved. There are lights, negative energy, and full-body apparitions of soldiers. Also, a blue boy is seen, thought to be an orphan who froze to death one night while sheltering at the college. People see his face in the windows of a dorm on cold nights. Pennsylvania Hall was once a dorm and is now offices. The hospital and lookout posts were Confederate, and General Lee was there. Soldiers have been seen walking back and forth on the cupola of the building, possibly sentries to guard Lee or to deliver messages. A shadow has been seen in the tower, and a figure seen gesturing crazily to a student below that vanished when spoken to. No one was found in the building. On the 4th floor, 2 administrators were leaving late at night. They got into the elevator. It went down past the main floor to the basement. The doors opened and there was a scene from a field hospital. They were looking at the operating room. Blood, men, surgeons, but all in silence. As the elevator doors were closing, one ghost looked at them as if asking for help. These men never took the elevator in that building again. The Children's Orphanage is a place of many haunts. Thousands of children were orphaned in the Civil War. This orphanage was built with good intentions, but then a woman named Rosa J. Carmichael took over. She punished the children severely by even having a dungeon in the basement and chained the misbehaving children to the walls. They were locked up for days with no food or water. There was a pit, which was a lightless, tiny area where they were forced to stay as punishment. The orphanage is haunted by the spirits of the children that died from disease and malnourishment. Some think Rosa haunts the grounds too. Little Round Top, an area of the battlefield, is known to be a supernatural place. During the battle, it is said that George Washington's spirit appeared here to the Union soldiers, one time to lead them in the right direction before the battle, and another time to spur them on during the battle. The division commander testified, "We know not what mystic power may be possessed by those who are now bivouacking with the dead. I only know the effect, but I dare not explain or deny the cause. Who shall say that Washington was not among the number of those who aided the country that he founded?" This area is also known as the Valley of Death and the Slaughter Pen because so many men's bodies lay decomposing there after the battle for months. The paranormal activity in the area is thought to be due to the intense fighting and the number that died there. During the filming of the film Gettysburg, actors dressed as soldiers were resting on Little Round Top. Out of the bushes came a ragged man smelling of sulfur, which is an ingredient in black powder, and he was in a Union uniform. He mentioned what a rough day it had been and handed the actors some musket balls. They took those musket balls to a shop in town, and turns out they were from the era of Gettysburg. Could this have been a ghost of a soldier? The Gettysburg National Cemetery has 4,000 Civil War graves. The area is very active. Many of the bodies from the makeshift graves were moved here, and it was designated as a Union graveyard. It is very active due to the violent and sudden deaths and the improper burials and the constant moving around of the bodies. This is also where Abe Lincoln made the Gettysburg Address. Balls of light have been seen here floating across the landscape. Apparitions are seen, and the sounds of cannons, gunfire, and men yelling can be heard. The Devil's Den is another rocky area where there were heavy casualties and intense fighting. It is known as the most paranormally active site of the battlefield. It is said that this area was named the Devil's Den either from a massive snake that lived in the rocks, that they named Devil, or from a story of the devil himself taking the form of a massive snake that lives there. More than 2,000 men died here trying to win the Devil's Den. Cameras lose all battery power or malfunction here when photos are taken. Some say a spirit is here that doesn't like photos. They believe it could be a Confederate soldier whose dead body was posed for multiple war photos that makes the cameras not work. The main area in which this happens is in the triangular field. Apparitions are seen and heard in the Valley of Death and in the Devil's Den. In addition to the Gettysburg battle being fought in this spot, there was also an early Native American battle called the Battle of Crows. Many Native Americans perished here. The area was known as a strange place before the Battle of Gettysburg. An apparition was once seen of a man standing on a boulder. The men who saw it were lost, and the apparition pointed them in the correct direction. In the 1970s, a woman asked a park ranger if ghosts were ever seen in the area. She proceeded to tell the ranger that she had been taking a picture of Devil's Den and she felt a presence beside her. She looked and a man was coming near. He looked like a hippie with long disheveled hair, a floppy hat, and no shoes. He said, "What you are looking for is over there." She turned to look and then looked back, and the man was gone. A month later, others reported a similar experience. A man had taken a photo, and a man appeared in the photograph that wasn't there. He described what the figure looked like to the ranger: long hair, floppy hat, and no shoes. Many of the soldiers from Texas didn't receive new shoes or clothing from home. Some say they thought this man was a Civil War reenactor and had their photo taken with him, only to find he vanished from the photos. A ghostly rider is also seen in the area that suddenly vanishes. Sounds of gunfire are heard, Indian whoops are heard, and dozens of photographs have claimed to have captured paranormal proof in this area. The Farnsworth House was built in 1810. It has its original walls, flooring, and rafters. It was occupied by Confederate sharpshooters. They used the attic to shoot at Union soldiers on Cemetery Hill. A shooter was practicing his aim on a doorknob on a house far away, and it pierced the door and struck Jenny Wade, who was mentioned earlier. The sound of a Jew's harp is heard in the attic. This was a common instrument of the Civil War. After the battle, the house was used as federal headquarters. Bullet holes are visible on the south side of the house. It is currently owned by the Schultz family as an inn and restaurant. They do a ghost story theater here and also do ghost tours of the house itself. Claimed activity includes seeing movements out of the corner of the eye, but then seeing nothing there. Shadows are seen in the dining room, but no one is found. Footsteps have been heard on the main floor at night, and people have reported being followed by footsteps. People have also been tapped or touched. One waitress had her apron yanked so hard that it moved her body in front of the customers. There has also been a sighting of an older woman in period dress looking at the shelves. Late at night after Valentine's Day, a tray with silverware raised up on its own and flew several feet and crashed on the floor. The George Wakert House is a small house located on the battlefield. There have been several different occupants over the years. One previous resident spoke of a door that won't stay shut that is on the second floor, even if it is nailed shut. Others have heard footsteps pacing in the attic, but no one is found. The Hummelball House is another house that is said to be haunted. They say the cries can be heard of a Confederate Brigadier General William Barksdale at night. He was brought to the house when he was injured. He was seen laying in front of the house asking for water from a young boy over and over again. They say you can still hear him calling on some nights. Another story from this house and from General Barksdale is that after he passed, they buried him in a temporary grave outside of the house. His wife came to retrieve his remains and brought the general's hunting dog along. The dog ran to the grave and laid down on it and cried and howled. Even after removing the remains, the dog refused to leave the grave. The wife left the dog, and the neighbors attempted to care for it, but the dog refused food and water, sitting on the grave howling. The poor dog ended up passing away from malnourishment. To this day, they say the dog's spirit remains, and that on July 2nd, the anniversary of his owner's death, you can hear a terrifying howl in the night. On the battlefield itself, spirits are often seen. Soldier ghosts seen marching in formation, soldiers on horses, and taking part in a battle. Spirits are seen at the sites of Pickett's Charge, the peach orchard, and the wheat field, amongst places. The Doubleday Inn is known to be haunted. Near the inn is an area called Iverson's Pit, where a brigade of North Carolinians were slaughtered. It is a mass grave. Ghosts are seen there today. The Tilly Pierce House Inn is haunted by a ghost cat and children, but they are all friendly. Servants' old-time photos, formerly Reynolds' Death House, is thought to be haunted by General Reynolds, the first Union general to die in the battle. He was brought to the house after being injured, and he passed away there. The Cashtown Inn is 8 miles west of town. It was the site of the first death of the battle, the first soldier killed there. Owners have photos of orbs and skeletons. They heard thumping on the doors, and lights turn on and off, and doors lock and unlock on their own. The Balladary Inn served as a field hospital for the Union soldiers. A psychic said that the hotel is haunted by Confederate soldiers buried under nearby tennis courts. Also, there have been photos caught of soldier ghosts, and there is a report of a flirty ghost named Jeffrey who whispers in women's ears and rubs their feet. These are just some of the hauntings of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, a historic town filled with tales of violence, blood, and death. Times of war, strife, and sadness left a mark on Gettysburg and left many spirits wandering the inns, homes, and battlegrounds. Do you dare visit the area? Links and information are below. Thank you for watching Realms of the Other World. Please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel. Also be sure to support us on Patreon. Have a good evening. Take care.